So today we're having a really exciting conversation with the lead developer at Goddard. Ryan McDonough, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So we're going to dive straight in. Now, you have a really interesting background, and we've been chit-chatting about COVID and life and philosophy, which we might get to in a second, because I like to tie conversations together.
Yep.
And one of the really interesting things about you, among many other things, is that you are a software developer inside of a law firm.
Yes.
Which is, I think, an exceedingly rare breed, and even more so, an exceedingly silent breed. How would you describe your role inside of a law firm?
Yeah, so I mean, I sort of work alongside the innovation and legal technology team. So it's full of a lot of legal technologists, ranging from people who've literally just started in the legal industry through to like senior associates and obviously partners as well. And I feel like I'm very much like a sounding board at times for ideas. So people may come to me and go, Ryan, a client's wanting to build this sort of site inside HiQ, which is one of our major platforms that we use. And they go, what's the best way we can do this? And I'll be very much going, well, what are they asking for? But realistically, what do they actually need? Because that's such a key thing, I think, nowadays. Previously in law, the partners or whoever would come to you and they go, I want this. And you go, okay, see you in a few months, and you bring it back and they go, that's rubbish. It doesn't do anything I want it to do. It doesn't do anything that I asked it to do. You go, well, this is exactly what you asked for. This is what you wanted, but it wasn't what they needed. And so I feel like my role is very much pushing what do we actually need to be building rather than what do we want to be building. That's where I sort of see my role. I obviously do a lot of hands-on development, but I like to be there very much as like a sounding board for ideas and being almost that naive person in the room. I've not got a huge experience in law. I have worked at a law firm prior to working at AG. But I always like to be that person going, so why are we doing it this way? What is there a reason we're doing it this way that I just don't understand? And sometimes it's very much there's a great reason we're doing it this way, and sometimes it's just this is how we've always done it. And I'm trying to push, the way we've always done things sometimes isn't the best way to be doing things anymore, especially in this sort of new era where there's, more and more tech firms coming along. You've got the sort of the big four tech law firms in the UK, and there's even big tech firms who have more lawyers than most law firms nowadays. Yeah. And they can come along and they can be going like, done, we can do that. They have the resources and they have the ability to do that. And more traditional law firms really have to change how they're working to be able to push themselves beyond these big, massive companies.
A few really interesting threads there. First one was client focus. Second, related to that, is being focused on the problem. What are you trying to actually solve for people? Third is your role as this kind of translator, almost like a bridge between the lawyers and the solutions. And fourth is the rise of kind of the competitive landscape changing. There's a lot of threads that we can explore there.
Yes.
But I guess maybe before we go and explore any of those threads, there's a few kind of related questions on this. Like, I think lawyers understand the problem very well, but they don't really understand the technology and how to achieve the outcome they're looking for. And so from your perspective, you almost need to get into the shoes of the lawyers. And one of the interesting kind of bifurcations or dichotomies is, do you get into the shoes of the lawyers who provide work for clients, or do you get into the shoes of the clients who receive the work from the lawyers? Which one's a more beneficial perspective?
It is almost 50-50. I feel there is more of a lean towards what the client's going to be needing. Because that is really key to what it is. We used to have a big sort of silo. So, you'd have like your development teams and, you'd have the lawyers who would chat to the client, but there would never be any conversations between the clients and the developers. You'd have your point of contact in the law firm. That's who you talk to. They'd have the suit, and everyone would be like, yeah, that's the professional I'm working with. I don't want to see the developers. But more and more of that is changing because we're able to sort of ask those questions that maybe the lawyers don't tend to think about for the solution, because that's not their background, in the same way that I wouldn't know the correct things to be asking from a legal perspective. There's very much reasons why we're both hired to do our specific job. But yeah, being able to sort of go to the client and go, okay, so why do you need it to do this? Are there better ways to be achieving this? Because, I mean, I worked at a digital agency prior to working at AG, and we had a client once, and there was a developer working on a solution to take all their contact lists from their forms online and put them into one massive spreadsheet. And he spent about 3 days working on it. And I said, so what are you doing there? He went, oh, well, they need all these spreadsheets. I went, but why do they need all these spreadsheets? He went, no idea. They just need all these spreadsheets. And I went back to him and said, oh, so what are you doing here? And, oh, we just need to know how many new people we've had sign up to the form. I was like, right. Well, we can do that in like probably 30 minutes of work. We could just, count how many new people you've got and just show it in the website for you. But they came with their want rather than their need. And it's not on the client or the lawyers to really figure out what the need is. They know what their want is, but we're here to provide the translation of what that turns into a need.
There's this process, and I'm sure you know of it, called a 5 whys.
Yes.
And it sounds like what you're doing is a very practical version of that. So what are the challenges that you find when you ask a client, hey, why do you need this? Why do you want this?
They've probably never been asked that before. In a lot of circumstances, previously in law firms, people just go, okay, we'll do that for you, because they were they wanted to please the client.
Service-oriented, right?
Exactly, yeah. And it was, it's always that thing, as Steve Jobs says, we don't care what people want, we care what people need. But, they were very much wanting to please the clients, because, it was dog eat dog, for a long time. The law firms coming and going, and, they wanted to retain the client. But clients are now realizing more and more, especially as they're getting these sort of legal solutions, there are so many better options that we can be looking at. And so if they're not actually getting what they need, then they can just move somewhere else. But they've never really been asked why they're achieving what they're wanting to achieve. And they've never had to deal with those sort of questions before. So it really opens up some really interesting meetings that we have with them. And you can start to, and again, it's one of the things we've missed with COVID, is having those face-to-face meetings, because you can just catch when someone's maybe a bit confused, or they look a bit like, that's not a good idea. And you can go, oh, I can see you don't think that's a particularly great idea. Why don't you think that's a great idea? So you have to be a bit more on the ball, looking at all the different photos to see, who's confused, who's a bit angry about your proposal. But really delving into that with them, you get such a, you get the initial idea, and then it just sprawls and sprawls and sprawls, and then obviously you have to try and cut that down into the MVP for them. But yeah, having that client feedback is just on a sort of a continual loop basis is just so important.
I think the flip side is true as well, where you can see that little light bulb moment in their eyes, and they just get it. And at that exact moment, that idea has legs.
Yes.
And for me, that's super exciting, right? Like when you see that little glimmer in the customer's eyes, you go, oh, pat yourself on the back. That was a good work.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing. And I think the clients have never had to really been involved in tech previously, and I found, early on in my career, there was two levels of people. There was either just amazed that you could build a website, like first draft, they go, that's fantastic, that's the best thing I've ever seen, amazing. Or they'd expect you to have built Facebook.
Right.
As it is now. They've got no sort of idea of how much work it takes to build a platform over time. And I feel like now we're starting to get to more to that middle ground, where people are expecting certain levels of polish, and they know what is possible. They see that apps can do amazing things nowadays, and they're going, well, why can't I have that with my legal tech? Why can't I see the progress of my case on a day-to-day basis? Why can't I see all my contracts and how they're broken down in a really easy-to-view format? Why are they still in some filing cabinet in paper that I've got no idea what's going on? So it's a really great sea change of that people are coming into it and going, I have an appreciation for tech, understand what can be done. Help me get that into my life.
So the trend that you're seeing in the marketplace, the movement towards people, well, one, expectation management, the kind of changing, we no longer expect you to produce Facebook within the space of 2 weeks.
Yes.
Like, what do you think has been driving that trend, and where do you think that trend is going? What do you think ultimately, let's say 3-year horizon, what do you think clients are going to want in 3 years' time from their law firms?
So I think going forward, I think clients are going to be expecting a lot more automation of processes. Previously, if you sent, a law firm, we've got 10,000 documents and we need you to break down all the clauses and give them back to us. Previously you just throw people at that problem. You go, okay, let's give 5 paralegals this job and they can work through it for the next 2 weeks and, not sleep.
Right.
But I feel like now clients are going to expect more and more be able to self-serve. They're going to expect places where they can, put all their documents and get their breakdowns. And again, there's always been this thing of, previously lawyers, not previously, they still do, they charge by those 6-minute brackets.
Yes.
And so, there's always that balance, that incentive of going, well, I can automate this, but how am I going to charge now? Yeah. Where's the money actually coming from? And then you have to sort of say to them, well, we're not producing less value. We're just doing it quicker. You can still charge almost an equivalent because they were willing to pay someone to spend all that time going through documents manually. There is a value to them for that. And that value has been very much determined by how much they would previously pay. And obviously you could lower that because you're automating it. But we're not saying, oh, it's only a $5 now to do 10,000 documents because it takes 12 seconds in some platform on AWS or Azure. So self-service is going to be one of those key things for clients. And again, it's almost that, and being proactive as well. So more and more we're seeing that, clients want to start giving us more of their data, let's say from a health and safety perspective of, logging all of their compliance things and almost having the firms having the visibility of that and not waiting for the client to go, oh, we've been inspected, it's a massive problem, we've got all these red flags. It's surfacing that to the law firm day by day, and the law firm starting to notice patterns and being proactive with the clients. So yeah, it's not a sudden emergency. You can start to nip things in the bud at that point. So I expect clients are going to expect the law firms to be more proactive in their approach as well.
What you're describing is this idea of move away from traditional hourly model, billable hour model, which is going to be super challenging. Every time someone talks about that, law firms, you can see the partners going, look, yes. Not going to let that happen. And you're moving towards almost like a management consultant model of being able to do project-based charging. Now, I think there are some cultural barriers to that, and I really like the direction you're going. I think this is where we have to go, but I suspect it's not going to be an overnight thing. What I'm seeing in the market is there's kind of that nibbling away at the bottom edge of the service spectrum, where some of the things that can be automated are being automated. And the cost is, well, the benefit of reduced cost is being shared between the law firm and the clients. Yeah. Now, that's going to start creeping up as technology improves, as processes improve. And as you were saying that, I kind of think about the spectrum of legal work. Right? People think about legal work in terms of the complexity and the value that's delivered. So you can kind of draw an XY axis of, on the Y-axis, it's complexity. On the X-axis, it's a dollar value. And all the law firms try and, well, all the major law firms try and position themselves in that top right quadrant of highly complex, highly valuable work. Yeah. And historically, the way that technology has been perceived is that it's able to do the low value, low complexity work. But actually, that's not true. Like technology these days with open APIs, with kind of like all the interconnected systems, is starting to nibble away at the complex work as well as the high value work. And when you think about it in these two dimensions, one of the things that actually people forget about is there's a third dimension of time. how much time can a person spend working on all of these different types of work? Do you spread yourself really thin on this whole plane, or do you focus all your time at the high value, complex end of stuff?
Yeah.
And when you kind of think about this value matrix in a three-dimensional way, I think that the perspective changes. People get more comfortable with, I'm happy adopting technology because I know what that's doing. It's not just cutting away at money I could be making, but it actually allows me to make money from the top end of work that I don't have enough time to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's. I mean, so recently we launched internally a due diligence platform, and so the way that we used to work was, an instruction would come through from a client. The people who would be involved in the deal internally would get sent around an email with some documents attached to it. And then they would just crack on. They start doing their reviews in Word and they go into a document management system. And then it would come to writing the report and people start copying and pasting chunks out of all these Word documents. And it just go in a round robin format.
Yep.
And so I was approached by a couple of the associates, some of the partners. They went, this is how we're doing DD currently. We'd like to look at doing it better, because there's that classic hit by a bus or won the lottery. If someone just doesn't turn up to work the next day and they're the one with the latest copy of the report,
yes,
how do you get that latest copy of the report? You need to know where it is. And they have that thing, if they paste some content into Word and the entire report will just shift to the left.
Yep.
Isn't in that classic Word thing of going, I've just added one word and the entire report's just completely horrific now. So we and AG are really pushing innovation now. They're going, how can we really push the tools that we have to make it for the best? And so we've built a whole platform where you define your the deal overview. So everyone on the team can see the deal overview on one page. There's another tab where you can start to define the scope of the due diligence thing. So again, that was a problem that we used to have, is people would start looking into things they didn't need to. Because they didn't really understand what the scope was supposed to be. But now there's a defined scope. You can see what's in and out of scope, so people aren't going down that rabbit hole and doing the wrong thing anymore. Then all the reviews are put into the system, so everyone has the same visibility of all the reviews of all the documents. And again, the same with the issues; they're all in there, and you can see how they evolve over time. So we can, in the future, start to go, oh well, we've noticed that people are rewriting the same issue in the same way each time.
Yeah.
So maybe why don't we do a bit more training on how this issue should probably be written in the first instance, and we can start to see how the due diligence evolves over time. And again, the final goal of this is what we've achieved is that we then produce a PDF output at the end of it. So it pulls all the data in and gives you a standard looking report that you can just then give to the client. You don't have to, if someone's late with their information, put it into the platform, click create PDF, done. You've got that PDF. And again, the next steps after that are going, well, PDFs are great, but you've got a $1,000 iPad, and you're just scrolling, you're giving people a PDF to review and they're scrolling through that. Why not invite them onto the platform? Why not allow them to delve into the information? And depending on your role in the firm, you can see different outputs. You can sort of see a more summarized view if you're like the CFO or the CTO or the CEO. And again, if you're the people actually implementing it, you see the full detail and the real recommendations. It's really pushing. It's sort of going, it was an internal product, but how can we actually make this, again, focus for the clients? And again, the teams at AG are really now focused on pushing that innovation to really give the clients the best bang for the money at this point.
That is so impressive, because I remember the days when I used to be the one coordinating and pooling all these different expert reports together, expert parts together. And then every single part is stylistically different. Every single part just is different enough that I would have to spend maybe a week rewriting everything.
Yes.
and like at the end of it, the old traditional model is, here's a 300-page DD report with a 2-page executive summary at the front, which that nobody's reading the 298 pages at the back, apart from that one guy at the buyer who has to go and carry it out for the next 12 months.
Exactly, yeah.
Making that into an interactive, useful report is so smart. And it's like, in hindsight, like obvious. Why haven't we done this already?
Exactly, and that was the thing. I remember when I heard how DD was being done previous, I was like, that makes no sense whatsoever. I was like, but as soon as things, that's just how we've done it. And, and it's the same for developers, why are we doing it this way? That's just how we've done it all these years until you sort of see a real benefit. I mean, I suppose the biggest one we've had for developers was source control and using that to deploy the websites automatically. Previously, we just copy the folder from our desktop onto the server, and if it broke, well, hopefully you made a backup folder on the server called, website_backup 72.
Yep.
But now having that automated process of I commit my code, it deploys to the server automatically. I don't have to worry about that happening. It's fantastic, and that's almost what's happened with DD is that at the start you don't go, I don't really see what the benefit of me putting it into this platform is and getting this PDF. I can do a Word document. That's fine. But over time, people are going, it is saving me time, and it's saving that stress of trying to collate all the information from people. You can see when people last updated records. If they said they were going to update it, you go, click, oh, they last updated it yesterday. They haven't done it yet. I can ping them a message and find out where it is.
Having information there in a report, okay, that's fine.
It's a report.
But it's static. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
You're actually making that active and useful, and I love that. I think that's so good. One of the things that engineers do a lot better than lawyers is standardization. So API standardization, data standardization. And I think for law firms, I mean, there's sort of a movement now, or in fact for the last 20 years, it started with the ISDA. So I don't know if you've seen those before. It's for international swaps. So where banks effectively say, hey, one of the most common uses is interest rate swaps. I'll swap you a fixed rate interest loan, you give me a variable, so we hedge our risks. Okay. And it had to be standardized because it was traded all around the world. And so people came up with this standard form document where to implement it, all you have to do is open a 2-page schedule and say, literally on, off, on, off, on, off for the different variables.
Yeah.
And that was great. But I think there are very, very few documents that have had the same standardization in the legal sector. Do you think, from what you've seen, there is a possibility for more standardized contracts, more standardized data inside of legal?
Oh, definitely so. Yeah, I mean, you can almost see, so with the legal scheme project, they're moving to this idea that contracts are very well defined. So, I mean, for example, instead of just having company name brackets company number, which you've probably seen lots of agreements between two companies, if then, let's say, regulation comes along and goes, let's say you get a new risk manager at a bank, and they're very intent on risk, and they go, okay, well, let's have a look at all of our contracts, which we've gone into, where the companies have a turnover of, say, 500k or under, because with COVID, we're a bit concerned that maybe they don't have the liquidity to be continuing on day to day, and it could be tomorrow 5 of the suppliers are gone, they just don't exist anymore. How would you go about doing that currently with contracts? You'd have to have someone go through and get all the company numbers from all the contracts, and then do lookups on company's house or the equivalent in America, and find out what is their liquidity and all those bits and pieces. But with the concept of like legal schema, you'd store the company, but as part of that, in a database somewhere, you'd store all their information at a point in time, and you'd store their company number, and so you don't have to include the company number in the report, but I can query it. And I go, okay, well, I've got all these company numbers. I can query company's house. I can get all the information down, and in half a day, I've got all the information I need to present back to the person interested in the risk of these smaller companies. Currently, there's no way to do that. I mean, we've had client projects where they're trying to standardize upon clauses in their contracts, and they have like 128 different versions of their confidentiality clauses. And it can be from the position of a comma to the wording of a sentence, or it could just be flat out completely different because people have added their little bits of flair over time. And so then when you actually need to come and change that confidentiality clause, how do you do that if you've got 128 different versions? You just can't do it. So you've got to standardize upon that things. And again, people sort of see it maybe particularly as maybe as an affront, going, well, I like to, and pay to provide better versions of these clauses. But again, you're almost getting tangled up in the boring work there of defining the best confidentiality clause. People can do that, and you can spend your time working on more interesting things for the client rather than getting bogged down in those bits and pieces. And again, this concept of having like legal schemas, so contracts are all very strongly typed, starts to move you then to the concept of smart contracts, because once you start to have your contracts in that format, moving to smart contracts is a much easier step than if you've got all your contracts currently in Word with 400 different variations of clauses. And then once you have smart contracts, it really does open up to how much more efficient the world, more efficient the world can be. We waste so many resources just putting a piece of paper on someone's desk for them to look at an invoice to then pay someone once a shipping container comes in. You could put a tracking thing on the shipping container, the smart contract to go, okay, well that GPS is now within the bounds of the port, therefore we can release the first amount of money automatically. No one's involved in that anymore, and again, it's going to be a huge change in how people work, but it's really freeing people to do more valuable work for people and reducing just that sheer waste. Because even if you think, oh, well, that's going to do me out of a job, it could do, but it's also not wasting a piece of paper each time. And that's just going to stack up. And the energy savings, especially given the world we're living in now, is so important.
Right. And this kind of idea of holding on to today's jobs rather than trying to create the jobs of the future, I think is one of those feelings that lawyers get whenever you talk about AI or technology advancements or smart contracts.
That's such a great way to put it. Of that, trying to protect today's jobs rather than looking at what tomorrow's jobs are. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And it's I think that a lot of developers start to see is that going, people can start to put in open.ai. They can go, create me a design which does this and this and this, and it gives it them.
Yep.
And it's the same for the lawyers. Is you can probably automate a portion of their job, but the value they're bringing isn't looking for a contract and extracting entities. It's interpreting what that actually means and taking the law. So, I mean, for example, we can scan through contracts and we can extract references to legislation.
Yep.
So I can say this is making a very specific reference to this legislation. I don't really know what the impact is, but I can tell the lawyer that there's a reference to this legislation. And it's then on to them to actually interpret that impact, because I imagine it's be quite hard to realistically ever train AI to know what the impact of legislation is upon, some fluffy worded clause.
The best outcome for a lot of these kind of technology tools is actually a marriage between technology and people.
Yes.
And as you say, right, like if you threw a reference to a law plus some floppy words to an NLP engine, they're going to try their best to try and make sense of that, but it's not going to be that useful. And instead, why don't you turn the engine to find all the relevant information, put it in front of the lawyer so he doesn't have to spend 2 hours searching.
Exactly, yeah.
And those 2 hours can be spent thinking about, well, what's my client actually trying to do? What's valuable to them?
Yeah, and it comes back to that, reevaluating how do we charge for this work? Because again, I'm not charging for my time in that sense. I'm charging you for the output and how that value is what that value is to you.
Exactly. And I think that's a fundamental shift in the model. Now we've come full circle. So I'm gonna say my final question to you is: what are you most excited about in the legal sector, in the technology sector, in what you do?
It's the movement to having more of these sort of low-code, no-code platforms. And as a developer, you think that's going to do you out of a job, sort of thing. But being able to, my job will still be there. I'll be writing API integrations potentially for no-code platforms. But it is sometimes hard for developers to be perfectly in the mind of the people who want to try and build something. And having the legal technologists chat to the lawyers and go, okay, I know what you're trying to do here. Let me try and build it in one of these no-code platforms. And they can build exactly what they need. They don't need me to be there just moving a mouse around for them, trying to make sense of their requirements. They're doing it directly there, and they can start to chain more and more of these services together. I can still be there providing the input on going, oh, well, we can maybe structure this data a bit better so it's more reusable, and we can start to build more integrations. So I think it's almost like democratization of who can do the development work.
Yep.
And opening it up more to more and more people, and allowing lawyers, even like the lawyers go, okay, you can have access to this no-code platform, build what you think you want it to do, and then we can improve it. We can make it better. We can take it and make it even more, make it more complex, do more integrations. But having them know that they can be working on it as well is really key and really empowering to how they view the tech that they're starting to have to use every day. It can be quite scary, this idea of going, oh, we're using this platform now, deal with it sort of thing. But then being empowered to use the platform and see the benefits and, automate part of their job that they don't like doing, is going to be so empowering to people.
Beneath the surface layer of we want no code and low code platforms is a recognition that there's a resourcing problem inside the legal sector. There's actually not enough people doing the sort of work that makes a real impact, that changes how legal services are consumed. So the underlying problem of not having enough resources can possibly be solved by having better technology solutions and having people like you connect all of these things together to chop away at the low end of complexity, the low end of the value, and freeing up more time for the higher end stuff.
Exactly, yeah. That's where I really see where I bring a lot of my benefits is going, we can automate this. We can previously with some of the systems, they were creating iSheets inside HiQ, and someone would have to go through and click, 14 times to create a field in an iSheet. Yeah. I said, oh, well, maybe you can just define it in an Excel sheet, and I'll figure out how to turn that Excel sheet into an iSheet inside of HiQ. Yeah. And so now they can design an iSheet in 5-10 minutes, say it to me, it gets imported, it's done in 1 minute upload. Yeah. Whereas previously that was probably a half-day job of messing around trying to do things. And that's just half a day that we no longer worry about. People used to do it. I have no idea what they're spending their time on now. We always find replacements for our time. Exactly. Yeah.
Seeing your kids.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I've seen it before. We've seen people describe the savings in time, and instead of viewing it as a saving in time of money, viewing it as a saving in time of how much extra time can you see your children? How much more time can you spend exercising? How much more time can you spend reading? As opposed to just going, oh well, we've saved you £500 of billable time.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic, Ryan. I've taken up so much of your time already, and I'm so grateful that you made time to chat today.
Thank you very much. It's been fantastic to chat to you.